Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening for some of you. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show and tell episode. I'm going to be speaking with a Sketchbook Skool student named Michelle Marques that some of you might have met at SketchCon, and she told us a wonderful story there of her creative journey, and I'm so excited to share it with you all. So we've got Robert checking in, and Debbie and Joanna. She's in Montana. We've got Chris from Michigan, so she's in the Midwest, just like me. Marjan is here. Cassandra's in France, which is great to see her checking in. Maria in Brazil, and John from California. And Val's here too from California. So thank you everyone for hopping by and checking out our show and tell episode for today. And just for those of you that have never watched show and tell before, just to brief you on kind of what the idea is behind this installment, or this segment, is that we really want to share the stories of the students that make up our community. So we know that you guys are all a really diverse bunch, and you have some amazing creative journeys that you've shared with us. And I'm thrilled to get to introduce students to you sort of face-to-face, kind of in a different way. So you're not only seeing their artwork in the schoolyard, but you're seeing their faces and you're hearing stories told live by them. So without further ado, it looks like we have a couple more folks checking in. We've got Kevin and Elizabeth and Bonnie. Great to see your names popping up in the chat. And now I'm going to bring on our guest. Her name is Michelle, and she's actually in California, so she got up bright and early for us today. And for that, I'm very grateful. So let me just, I'm going to get her in the right spot here. And this is Michelle. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, how are you doing today? How's it going?
Good. I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little bit strange, but
yes, well, we really appreciate you stepping up to the plate, even if you're a little under the weather, so thank you. I have to say your flower's bright and colorful, and you're looking pretty chipper, so thanks for joining us. So, Michelle, one of the things that I want to start off with for you to talk about is just sort of your background and how you got started making art. I know you had a pretty creative family, and I would love to hear more about that.
I do. My creativity, I don't know. This is hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about like where your own creativity comes from.
Right.
I've always been a really dramatic, like showy kind of a person. As soon as in kindergarten, like even before kindergarten, we used to play Star Wars in the backyard, and I played a couple of roles, and it was like always super dramatic and fun. I wasn't really into drawing so much as a kid, little bit in middle school, but it was just sort of, it wasn't something that caught my attention.
Right.
My grandmother was an artist. She was great. She worked in watercolors and acrylic, and she did sketches, and she drew our family Christmas cards every year with sort of these great scenes.
Yeah. And I have
it was really
painting
cool.
I'll pull up so that people know what you're referencing.
Yeah.
So this painting that she did, you could talk about.
Yes. So this is actually a portrait of me as a little kid. I think I was about 3 years old, holding a watering can in our backyard. And I have this painting, and it's very, very special to me. I've had it since I was a teenager, and I just keep it with me. And it actually plays a part in my sort of fire story that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I love this painting, and she was definitely an influence on me in terms of art, and it was great to talk with her, even though we didn't have a lot of chances, really, because my artistic, drawing and painting happened later in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have a lot of time to sort of pick her brain about drawing and art, but it was nice to talk with her about it.
Right. So you had all these really good influences kind of just percolating in the background, right?
Yeah. And my dad actually also. My dad would paint like cartoon characters on our walls. Like I had Raggedy Ann and Andy on my walls when I was little. My brother had Tigger and Pooh on his walls. And then he would do Christmas scenes on our windows, our front windows facing out towards the neighborhood. And he did it all just by sight. He was copying things, but he was really good at it. He didn't need to trace anything. So I think I also some from my dad. I didn't think about that much, but it's there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's clear you absorbed it. And even if it didn't really affect you or come out until later, we're really glad that it did. And it seems like I want to share another image here of another sort of creative beginning for you that arose out of a problem and a really interesting medium that I don't think a lot of us are familiar with. If you want to talk about that creative
Sure.
venture.
Back in about 2010, 2011, I was dealing with my stepdaughter who was biting her nails a lot.
I'm guilty.
I was trying to
Guilty of
think of
that.
a way to keep her from biting her nails. And I thought, well, she has really pretty nail art on her nails. She won't pick at it. She won't bite it. That did not work. But I got hooked on it. And of course, the internet leads to all things great. And so I started looking at really cool nail art and watching how people were doing it. And I started to do really elaborate nail art. I'm not sure which of these images you're showing.
This is the Kermit the Frog, which is so detailed and has a portrait on one of the fingernails of Jim Henson.
Right. So it's Jim Henson operating Kermit as a little puppet. And so, I mean, really elaborate stuff. But I started to get really sad about wiping it all away with acetone because I'd spend hours on these things and then they were gone. And there's a Zen lesson in all of that, right? Nothing is permanent. But I really wanted to hold on to my artwork. So I moved from the nail art to mini canvases. I found these little tiny 2-inch by 3-inch canvases at an art store, and I started doing that. So I was able to continue with my art practice in a more permanent way.
Yes, but still very miniature, which I think is kind of a funny little theme.
Yes. I feel comfortable small. Usually, I mean, my biggest painting right now is like 12 by 16. Like that for me is like, oh my God, it's beautiful.
Oh, well, that's still quite large compared to your tiny thumbnail palette, or thumbnail surface. Yeah, that's great. And so you've worked in a ton of different mediums, and I also thought it was really interesting that a certain pretty tragic event happened in your life. It kind of changed the way that you made art, and it also changed the way that you used art and kind of connected with people. So I'm showing a couple images of the fires that happened in Santa Rosa, which are devastating images. This one is the barn burning that is, really intense to look at. And I don't know if you want to tell us just a little more about when that happened and sort of how it came about.
Yeah. It was actually a couple months after I found Sketchbook Skool, and I had started the class, the imagining class, imagination. And so I was in the process of doing that class, and on October 8th, it was a Sunday night, the new videos had just released, and I was starting to watch Stefan Buscher's great videos. And I got a text from one of my coworkers. I work as a news anchor part-time at a local radio station. And he texted me and he said, hey, do you want to come in and help me? There's a situation, there's some fires. And as soon as I got that text, I smelled the smoke. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll be right there. I just have to grab some things. So I put some things together and headed out from my home. And I saw, it was really windy that night. And I smelled smoke, and I saw sort of the sky was a little bit like glowy. And then I got to the end of my cul-de-sac, and I looked to the north, and I saw the entire ridge on the hillside was engulfed in flames. And it was just this bright line of yellow.
Yeah, and you had the drawing of that.
It was just, that took me a while to draw. It was horrific. I'm from Western Washington, and moved to California in 2003, and I never had any experience with wildfires because we have moss everywhere, and it was
right.
wet.
It's not going to catch fire.
California, this was horrific. It was awful, and I knew it was headed straight towards a very populated area. I turned right back around and woke up my housemate and told her to get ready and get the dogs and get out because I didn't know how close it was going to come to our house. Right. And I went into the station and spent the night. It was from midnight, a little after midnight, until noon the next day, just just reporting whatever we knew. And it was tough because we didn't really know what was going on. Like the cable went out. Some of our other stations in town nearly burned down. I mean, the fire came right close to them. So for a while, our station was the only one that was on the air. And people who worked at the station started trickling in, and, then the next team sort of took over. And for the next week, it was solid reporting. I'd take the day shift, and our news director took the morning shift, of course, with the team behind us. But it was tough. It was horrible, and it burned really fast. It scorched from Calistoga, sort of where it started, through into Santa Rosa, which is a big distance. Yeah. And at the time, it was the most destructive wildfire in California.
Mm-hmm. And I have the image right now of your essentials and the picture of you in the studio, and it looks like you were just camped out with your important belonging. I see the painting that we shared earlier.
With me, my signed Tom Waits CD, which had to be with me. Toothbrush, and I was sort of a nomad for that week. I did not stay at my home. My home was under advisory evacuation just for a day during that week while they were battling the fires. But I just didn't feel safe. So I didn't stay at home. I stayed with friends.
Right. And I mean, we're so fortunate that you obviously got out and stayed safe, and you probably informed a ton of people through your work and your team at the radio station. So I'm sure lots of people out there are thankful for the work that you guys were doing. And
it was super stressful. I mean, there are times when I had to just stop being on the air and cry, and people died. It was horrible.
Yeah, I can't imagine being in that position. And I know you were it kind of changed sort of the art that you were making. And one of the images that was so powerful that I'm going to put on the screen now is your angry red crow drawing. And I think you were talking about just the anger and the sadness. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how it affected your art making at the time. How you responded.
Yeah. The crow came about a year later. We're coming up on the anniversary, and I went to the art store and I bought all different kinds of red stuff.
Yeah.
One being this huge Posca pen, like really thick red. And there were other things. I mean, we don't live in a vacuum, so there was some political stuff that I was also reacting to at the time of the anniversary. And then crows also, they sort of symbolically, and they show up, I don't know, at times that are really tough for me. So that sort of cry of red and the anger of the crow. So it's not literal of anything that was happening around me, but it helped sort of release some of that anger and tension onto the page.
Yeah, and you were even at the time, I think, making art. I saw you shared an image called Initial Mark Making, but you were hanging out, I think, with a friend or a friend's child.
Yeah. Because I was sort of a nomad at that time, and the air quality was terrible in Santa Rosa. I have a friend who lives in the southern part of Sonoma County, Katie, and I went to stay with her just to get my brain out of things. And she has a little son, Charlie. And we played Legos, and we watched the Batman movie, and we did normal things, and the air quality was better. And she had put this piece of sort of butcher paper on the table for Charlie to draw, because we didn't go outside. Everybody was wearing masks, and but he was going stir crazy, so she needed stuff for him to play with. And so I picked up some of I did actually bring my paints with me. That was one of my essentials, sketchbook and paints. And so I drew this little thing. Katie likes redwood trees, so I did a little redwood drawing on this paper. And I actually found out from her yesterday that she kept it, and she she has it framed. So
that's lovely.
It's just adorable. So nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was so excited about Sketchbook Skool, and it was a super bummer to have to stop, and I couldn't finish the course with everybody. And I mean, those seem like maybe minor things, but
right.
You lose some normal stuff when these terrible things happen to you. And drawing was comforting, and I wanted to get back to it. So that was just my first mark making there. Yeah. And then there's my actual sketchbook with Daisy the dog. That was maybe about a week and a half later. Do you have that
Let me see
one?
if I had that one. No, I have your sketchbook project image of the palm trees.
Okay.
Um,
I think I have Daisy here. I think I might be able to show you.
yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm going to find it super quick. That was just sort of dealing with, no, I don't have it. Shoot. Okay. There were swear words all over it. It was just
understandable.
light drawings of our dog Daisy, and then just writing "F you, fire."
Yeah, that's understandable.
I needed to get that out. I was so upset, and there wasn't a way to really talk about it or process the ideas yet, and so it was just really sort of raw, and that was the strong word that needed to come out.
And that's completely understandable to anyone. I know anyone watching this right now would probably can't even fathom, what that would be like to be in that position. And it's awesome that you had that outlet to kind of get that out in the immediate moment. And then it's clear, I'm going to show some other images of your art, that it kind of, evolved over time. Like you said, you were still responding to things. So there's your palm trees sketch that was a restaurant.
Yeah. The palm trees one is actually part of a couple months later. I did the sketchbook project in Brooklyn.
Yes.
So I was doing tacos was my theme for my sketchbook, and so it was just all like sort of my stories with tacos. It was pretty hilarious. But there was a taco story that involved the fires. This was a restaurant that burned down, and so I drew it in the sketchbook as a place where you used to be able to go get tacos. It was also really interesting to think about the fire in that sense, because I looked really closely at how the fire had damaged the building and what it did to the trees surrounding the building, and to see the lines and the way a building collapses under that heat in the fire. It's another way to understand it. All of these things are ways to deal with it.
And to document that is incredible. And I'm going to show your other images. You had an image called Life Finds a Way, and I just love the graphic nature of this drawing. And for those of you that can't see, it says a blackened trunk of a tree in Lakefield is sprouting new growth a year after the fires. It feels very hopeful. And I just love this image so much.
Yeah, and along my path where I drive to my other job, I'm an event coordinator, I go through neighborhood that got completely decimated, and it's coming back. Things are, they're building. There's a new apartment complex that hopefully will be open very soon, which is great.
Yeah.
But along that path, there are tree stumps and just things that look like a just straight burned log standing there. But then I noticed that there was a tree growing out of the top of that burned trunk. And it was pretty amazing that, it looks like there's nothing could come back from that, and then a little tree grows out of it. It's pretty cool.
And that's an amazing metaphor, I think. And you were still responding to and reacting to this in different ways in your sketchbook. And I think it's cool to see that evolution of your processing of this, the grief or the anger, the grief, the hope, and even some of the more sort of memorial drawings that you did. You did a series on victims of the fire. And these were really particularly gut-wrenching because you were putting faces. And I'm showing your picture of your drawing of Carmen, I believe.
Yeah, that was tough. There was, I think in Sonoma County, 22 people died. I think it was over 40 people within the complex of fires. There was a few different fires that had started. And Carmen's story was horribly tragic. She was visiting Sonoma County with her family and celebrating with her husband. I think they'd been married over 50 years, and they were in a beautiful vacation home, and the fires hit. And to survive, she and her husband jumped into the pool and tried to stay safe from the flames and the wind and the smoke. And they just spent all night sort of bobbing up and down and trying to stay cool. And she didn't make it. She passed away in the morning. And so then he had to walk down the hill and find, someone to help him. And she had passed away. So
yeah, and the fact that you're able to tell these stories and sort of help these people live on is so powerful. and
Right.
incredible.
Yeah, remembering who those people are, because
Right.
it's very easy just to say the numbers, 22 people died, but it's important to know who those people are. And it was calming and interesting to look at her face and her smile and her eyes and think about her life, even though I didn't know her, but there was, there's a connection.
Yeah, that's really special. And I think connection is something that comes up a lot for you in your art, and you were even connecting with your community in different ways. I'm going to share the thank you card that you created that was so beautiful. And you were trying to use art again to connect with a community that was hurting, and to also connect with people that helped put that community back together, and rescue that community. So your first responder thank you card is beautiful. And
that was pretty amazing. I mean, people from all over the country. In fact, outside of the country, we had Canadian firefighters who were here. I think there was even some people from Australia who came to help us put out the fires, and we had to have that help. It was such a massive fire. We needed their help to rescue us. And every day as I was going into the radio station to report, I'd see different fire crews, and their names are on their engines. And I saw one from Compton, and I was like, and so then I decided, this was after the fires, I decided to draw a little thank you note. And so I drew their fire engine and sent them a thank you card.
That's so lovely. And I think, again, just using art in different ways to connect with people after something so horrific is a part of that hope and that message, from earlier in your sketchbook that you're carrying on, which is great. And I'm sure that the firefighters appreciated it. And I'm sure just having the presence of art in such a small but meaningful way was huge for them and for you. And the other interesting project was the Resilience pin project, which I'm showing an image of that. It's beautiful.
So this was created by Michaela Bouchard, I think is how you pronounce her last name. She's a graphic artist in Sonoma County. And when the fires happened, she, just like everybody else, felt really kind of helpless. And what do we do? And so in those first hours of the fire, she created this image of a rose. And so Santa Rosa, Saint Rose, right, is the name of where we live. Yeah. So she created this Resilience, and it's really beautiful, of hands clasping to form the image of a rose. And she made pins and sold them and raised tens of thousands of dollars for fire victims with this image. And we also used it in our local parade the following year, and it really became a great symbol for Santa Rosa.
Yeah, and an icon just moving forward. It's really beautiful. And I think, you're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of this horrific event and the events that followed, even in the year after, even worse fires that happened around the country. But luckily you've been able to move on and keep reflecting and keep healing. And the other part of your story that I love is that you're still using art to connect with people. Whether it's in a community sense in light of a tragedy, or even in your personal work now, going back to that theme of your family and connecting with your family over art, you are working on a project right now that I think is interesting, just with another relative. I love that you're still doing art in your daily life, and I would love to hear just a little bit more about that before we wrap up.
Sure. My grandmother, as I mentioned, was an artist. My Aunt Margie was a school teacher, and I actually worked with her during college, because I was in the same town when I was going to college, and helped teach in her classroom's drama classes. It was very fun. Was going to be a teacher, but moved in another direction. And after retirement, my Aunt Margie had these books that she's written, some manuscripts of for children's books. And at a family reunion, she asked me whether I might be interested in working with her on illustrating one of her manuscripts and putting the book together. And she had seen some of my things that I had been posting from Sketchbook Skool, and recognized sort of that thread from my grandmother to me, was pretty excited about it. And she also sent me some of my grandmother's art supplies after my grandma passed away, which was super amazing. I have some of them here.
Yes, we'd love to see those.
watercolor pencils from.
Original watercolor pencils.
Yes. So those are pretty cool. And I also got some brushes and some of her sketchbooks. And so I thought this was a really great way to continue with my art. And I've been thinking about wanting to do some illustration and move in that direction. So this was a great opportunity. So we're working on the book. I don't know, maybe about halfway, maybe not quite halfway. And it's fun. We Skype every week, and I show her my progress, and we did a bunch of thumbnail sketches and things. So I can show you a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. What's allowable, for copyright reasons.
The book is about emotions, and so it just helps kids, think about different emotions. And we're using some friends of ours as models. So, because I tend to paint a little bit more photorealistically. So here is a painting. I'm not sure how well you can see that.
Yeah, yes, I can see it. Is it watercolor or gouache?
It is watercolor.
Watercolor.
So this is my friend Rachel, and she's baking up a cake for her son.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And so I'm working on sort of the other portion of this. This is actually what I was working on this morning, is her son.
Oh, cool. Kids are so hard to draw. So you did a really great job. I feel like younger people are.
Yeah, and then there's another vignette where a little girl is playing hide and seek with her dad. And here he is. He can't. Where she is.
Lovely. That's lovely.
And then here he finds her.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
It's such a sweet story. And I just love that, like you said, you're working with your aunt on this sort of collaborative project, and your creative journey has taken you from solving problems of nail biters to collaborating on a children's book, and a lot of really powerful things in between those two moments. So I wanted to say thank you for sharing your story and all the different chapters of it, and for being part of our community. That's really special that you were able to process a lot of this, some of the more tragic parts of your creative journey in our community. And we love supporting you, and we love that you're sharing this with our community again today. And so I want to thank you for your time, and thank everyone else for tuning in and for checking this out today. And this will be on the YouTube channel for Sketchbook Skool if anyone missed the beginning or needs to catch up. But Michelle, thank you so much. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. I'm going to keep painting.
Excellent. Have fun, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, are you still there?